Good evening. I've been talking to my friends and to Fair Damsel recently about using Ouija boards. Is it dangerous? Is it just a game? Can you contact ghosts or spirits? Well, I'd like to tell you about an experience I had when I was 18. And I was going out with a girl called Mary, who had a best friend called Susan. And I and my best friend, Jim, would meet up with the two of them to babysit at my brother's. Now Jim and Susan had nothing in common at all, so we used to sit there watching films, playing games, Monopoly, that sort of thing. But on this one night, this one Saturday night, late in October, Susan came up with an idea of playing on a Ouija board. And it just so happened that she'd brought this Ouija board with her. Brand new. Well, Mary wasn't happy about it. Jim didn't care much either way. And I wasn't bothered either. So we decided to try it. And we set it up. And we put our fingers on that plastic planchette. And Susan started to call out, "Is there anybody there?" Only she did it much more serious than I did. And we all sat there with our fingers on this plastic planchette. And after a little while, it started to move to yes. So we started asking it questions. And I must admit that the questions were pretty much mundane questions. And it was quite a pleasant conversation. We learned one piece of information that was quite useful. And that was that her name was Ethel. And to be honest, that's about all we did learn. Well, the next week we tried again. Set it up again, put our fingers there and asked the questions, is there anybody there? And yes, came the answer. And this time the conversation was a bit more fluid, and we learned that we were talking to someone called Ethel Crett, who just happened to have died in the mid-1800s, at the age of about 23, we thought, from what she was saying. And she was buried in the local municipal cemetery. Now that was something we could check, because there was a Victorian part to the cemetery. So, the following day, the four of us made our way to the cemetery and walked along this winding path to the back, where virtually no one went any longer because it was all old graves. And we searched, and sure enough, we found this grave with the name Ethel Crett on it. And it gave her age as 25 years. And she was unmarried. Spinster, it said. Didn't give us the cause of death, but then they very rarely did. They just had these nice little messages on them. So, the following week, armed with this information and convinced that we'd actually got in touch with this Ethel Crett, we were able to go back and use the Ouija board again. But this time something was different. From the very outset, when it said yes, there was an undertone to the conversation. It wasn't friendly anymore. It wasn't fun anymore. And I could see that Mary was looking uncomfortable. We carried on. And then Susan asked the question, "Where are you now?" And it went to H. Good. It went to E. Good. Then it went to L. Mary flung the board up in the air, it turned over, landed flat on the floor, and she refused to have anything else to do with it. Well, that was the end of that, or so we thought. But the following week, the two girls were away on a concert. They played in the youth band. So Jim and I had a night out on the town. It was all right, we had a few beers, chatted to loads of friends, even chatted to a few girls. And we stayed out till about 11:30. All the buses had finished running by that time. So we walked home. It was about 25 minutes walk. And we came to a part by the cemetery, funnily enough, where our paths diverged. and he went home that way, and I turned to the left. Now we both had about another 15-20 minutes walk ahead of us, but we used to cut that down by taking a shortcut through alleyways. Now the alleyways cut between the houses on the estate, and the part that I was going through was where all the old age pensioners' bungalows were, so it was very quiet, and you never had to worry about anything. And besides, I was 18. You don't worry about things when you're 18. So I started walking into the alleyway. There was no lights there. The only light you could see was behind you on the street lamps, and they faded quite quickly as you got further into the alleyway. Now, as I walked in, I'd maybe gone about 20 feet, and I got this uneasy sensation. But I kept going, because what's an uneasy sensation? Could be anything. I kept walking. At the alleyway I was in, it cut into a T-junction at the bottom. To the right it was a dead end. To the left was a continuation for me to get home. So I carried on walking. But the closer I got to that T-junction, the stronger this feeling of uneasiness became, and I felt the hairs rising on the back of my neck. It was overpowering, overwhelming. And I just decided it wasn't worth it. And I turned and I ran, and I didn't stop running until I got home. I went the long way round, which would normally have taken me another 15 or 20 minutes, but I did it at full speed. The next day, when I saw Jim, we were talking about this event, and he said, before I said anything at all, that he'd had this really weird experience on the way home. He was going to take a short through an alleyway that led to his house, and he'd got halfway in and he felt there was something wrong, and he turned back. Now he didn't run, he walked, because he didn't go as far into the alleyway as I had. He just walked. But it was so overwhelming to me that, I thought, should I really tell him about it? Would I sound like it was all a story made up and everything? But obviously he'd had a similar experience, so I told him about mine. And he just said, well, I'm glad I didn't go any further. The next day, we saw the two girls again. And they told us that they'd had this awful feeling of uneasiness when they were coming home from the concert, when they'd got home to their separate houses. They'd had this uneasy feeling all the time that something was watching them, something was spooking them out, if you like. So that very afternoon, Susan took out the Ouija board in its box, and we stood around in the garden as she put it into the metal bin and set fire to it. That was the end of the Ouija board. The uneasiness, the sense of being followed, of being watched, that lasted for a while. Maybe 2 weeks, a little bit more, but gradually it eased away. But I still remember today that feeling I had of uneasiness as I entered that alleyway, and how that feeling grew to such a level that I just could not go any further. And I'm glad I didn't, because who knows what might have happened. If you go to play with Ouija boards or anything like it, be prepared for the worst. And in my view, don't mess about with them.